This is the inaugural episode of the Grad School Grind podcast. My name is Dr. Seanan Kelly. We start our conversation off today, our first conversation, advice for incoming doctoral students. I am joined by Dr. Chuck Banaszewski and the Assistant Dean of the Grand Canyon University College of Doctoral Studies, Dr. Nick Markette. Gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural episode.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad I can collaborate with you guys.
Yes. So this is a project we've been thinking about for a long time, and we wanted to start out with, I'm an incoming doctoral student, what should I expect? And we thought nobody better to ask than the Assistant Dean at Grand Canyon University, Nick Markette. And what would be your advice?
Well, sometimes you get in and it sounds exciting, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
Absolutely.
And I think there's many perspectives to take when you start your doctoral journey. The first, and probably Dr. Banaszewski could talk to this better than I, but probably approach it more like a marathon than anything else, and know that there's going to be lots of little steps to get to that final point. The other thing I think is important to understand is your objective is to get to commencement, which is the beginning. The doctoral program is designed to prepare you to start, to be a change agent where you are in the world, to be a researcher, and to continue to advance knowledge in your space. So when you start with the perspective that you're trying to get to the starting line, it takes a lot of stress off, and you're not trying to get to the finish line. The next thing I believe is you have to start out with values-based time management. At least in our program, most of our students are working, they have families, and they're juggling all of these things. And it really helps to start and look at what matters most in your life. So I'll take mine. It would be faith, family, health, and then my service to my students in the College of Doctoral Studies, and then the kids I coach in soccer. Those are my priorities. So anything that's not on that list that's burning up time is a time vampire, and we have to be cognizant of that. And so once we've laid out those values, now it's time to get out your calendar. Okay, so your work is going to take a certain amount of time every day, and so get that on your calendar. And maybe church is going to take up a certain amount of time, and get that on your calendar. Family, so maybe your kids are in Little League or soccer or dance, and you know when they need to go and when you need to drive them. Health, so maybe while your kids are at Little League, that's when you're taking a run or you're going for a walk or doing something of that nature, and you're getting it all fit in there. And then you say, okay, a doctoral program is going to take 20 to 30 hours a week. How do I start fitting that in there? Meanwhile, though, if you look at your day and you find yourself, wow, I'm spending too much time on Instagram or YouTube or something of that nature, you have to be aware of those vampires that are stealing from the values that you have and are not contributing to you going forward. Now, there are times for you to have some downtime and give yourself a mental break, maybe to just space out and do a little social media, but you don't want it to creep and all of a sudden, wow, I just burnt 45 minutes or an hour and a half, where you said, oh, I'm going to schedule 10 minutes for some mental downtime. So I think the beginning is you start with the big picture in mind of getting to the starting line, and then you bring it down to the granular level and say, okay, what are my values, and how do I schedule my month, my week, even my days, so that you can be as efficient as possible. So those are where I would start when you start the doctoral program.
I love it how you use the term starting line, because as an instructor that teaches a lot of the first class students, a lot of the students show up wanting to be at the finish line, right, instead of the starting line. So what can we do to tell students how to avoid that temptation or avoid that mistake of wanting to be ready to write the dissertation on the first day?
It's funny, I joke a lot with students that are in the middle or in year two, and I said, I can see your face, and your face is saying, forget the cheese, let me out of the trap. But what we know with human endeavors is we have to have a compelling vision. And it's important to understand for the student, what am I going to do with this doctorate? What is my vision? And how am I going to be a change agent out in the world? And that vision has to be compelling. I think it's also important for them as they paint that picture to know that those people around them are watching. So their kids are more likely to succeed academically when they earn their doctorate. Even their kids are more likely to succeed. It's the great equalizer. So one, they need to have that vision of, what am I going to do when I hit that starting line at commencement? What does that look like? Why does that motivate me? But then what are all the side benefits going to be for my family and the other people that I influence with this example? Once you have that, what we know about human endeavors is not only do we need a compelling vision, but we need to have short-term wins, milestones, and we need to celebrate them. We noted on one of our YouTube episodes or lessons is my wife had a student, Dr. Beth Griffey, and so she bought a very expensive cheesecake, had it in pieces, and froze it. And every time she hit one of these milestones, she pulled it out of the freezer and she celebrated with a piece of that cheesecake. And then when she graduated or finished the program but got to the starting line, my wife, who was her chair, they remotely shared a piece of cake together to celebrate that final short-term win. So we need that big picture, compelling reason why we're climbing the mountain, but then we need to have those mile markers. So perhaps you say every 2 classes, I'm celebrating and I'm taking 2 days off with my wife or with my husband or with my kids. Or maybe even smaller, like, hey, if I hit all my things that I wanted to do this week and I wrote 4 pages towards my literature review, I'm taking the family to the movies or something like that. Those things have to be individual. So you have to find little milestones, little short-term wins, little fun ways to document that process as you get to the big time goal.
There's a through line there. I don't know, Dr. Banaszewski, if you're seeing it, hearing it as well, of intentionality. Intentionality with time, but also the goals and the objectives. I think sometimes our learners feel the great success is I finished the entire deal, as opposed to I'm in course 1 with Dr. Banaszewski, I'm in course 2 with Dr. Kelly, I'm in course 3 with Dr. Markette. I have X amount of courses to go, as opposed to saying, let me look back on what I've learned to this point and understand it as an additive process and be intentional about that.
Well, all I could think of is that we need a bigger cake.
But Dr. Kelly, I think you're on to something, and I hadn't really thought of it specifically about intentionality. But you're exactly right. I had a student, she's since graduated, become a friend, and she came from Ghana, and she entered the whole doctoral program with such a joyful spirit. And she teased me the first residency, and she said, Dr. Markette, why is everyone so stressed? And she really got me to think. She goes, this is a blessing that we get to do this. And now with technology, we can connect with more people and do it in a way maybe 30 years ago wasn't possible. And that perspective influenced me, and I didn't really think about it till you mentioned it, but that's a certain intentionality. We're going into this, knowing that each of these steps, we're going to be present for those steps. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because when I went through, I was hit milestone, and didn't stop and really enjoy it or suck the marrow out of the process and enjoy it. And I wish I had. And really
I share
stopped.
the same sentiment. And my apologies for cutting you off. I think it's one of those pieces where you feel like you have to crush the race right from the moment that the gun goes off, as opposed to look for the granular moments that offer you something in the micro, as opposed to something overarching that you might either be looking for or have an expectation for yourself, or believe that others have the expectation of you, and stop and slow down and ask the question, Dr. B, what worked for you? It may not be what works for everybody, but it worked for somebody, clearly.
Well, I look back at my experience, which was kind of unique. I was in fine arts and theater, and I was in an MFA program, and then transferred into the Ph.D. program at Arizona State. And I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, let alone an idea of a topic or anything like that. And in the first classes, or the beginning of a doctoral program, a lot of students stress out about not having a topic. So what would your advice or experience be with that?
Wow, sometimes the topic is a bit like happiness, and if you just force it and try to seek happiness, you don't find it. And sometimes the topic is the same way. So I came in passionate about high performing teams. Coming from business and being in athletics for so long, it was fascinating to me about what led human endeavors to be successful. And as I immersed myself in the literature, I was disappointed repeatedly that, well, they knew about it in sports and they knew about it in business, and they pretty much has established it in the military. And one day I was at my gym after competing. I'm laying on these rubber mats in sweat and tears, and I'm listening to two of my friends at the gym who were professors in education discussing compensation theory. And I said rather flippantly, I'm like, we already know that in business. That's been established in the literature. And then it hit me. I wonder if this field of high-performing teams has been explored in education. And sure enough, there was a big gap and a big need. And as I started investigating, a couple of professors at Harvard were super helpful to me and led me to my topic, and away it went. But I wasn't pushing it. I was taking my time for my health and exercising. I was networking. I was reading. And I knew my general area was in maybe the county. And then all of a sudden, that one conversation got me right to the zip code. I started doing more research in that specific space, and I was able to get right to the address on my topic. And it wasn't by forcing it. It was by experiencing it. So there's that old saying, I think we've all heard it. I don't know if our students have heard it, but the 3 things you need to do to find your topic is to read, read, and read. So I was doing that, but then there was this cross-pollination of an idea from 2 other scholars at a really unguarded moment. I mean, I was just laying a wreck on these dirty rubber mats after competing, in a CrossFit competition. And when they said that, I was like, boom, one was a Fulbright scholar, one has her doctorate, and they were discussing. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it hit me, like a bolt of lightning.
You bring something to mind in that narrative there, listening. How much, and I'll open that to everybody, I suppose, how much of your experience and, making your way through a doctoral program comes down to really listening to peers or to faculty or conversations going on around you?
Yeah, that's huge. And, a lot of what we do in an online environment is reading. So I would say listen with your ears and listen with your eyes to some extent. One of the downfalls, I think, of society today is that people listen to respond or read feedback in a paper to respond. But we as scholars, we want to rise above that, and we want to listen to understand, or we want to read feedback to understand. And then we want to be willing to reflect on that. So often we'll hear early doctoral students say, well, Dr. Kelly said this, and then Dr. Banaszewski said this, and now Dr. Markette, you're saying this. You guys contradict yourselves. And it's important to get them to understand, no, if you listen to understand, or if you read feedback to understand, and then you reflect on it, it's up to you to synthesize that to move to the next level where you can advocate for your own path, your own thoughts that you've constructed. So I think you're spot on. That is a skill set. The earlier you acquire it in the doctoral process, the easier path is going to be. If you can read, listen, breathe, let it marinate, reflect on it, take what you've read in the literature, and then declare your own path that you want to advocate for. And in that, I think what's so critical for our students to understand is that the conflict of ideas is super healthy. The conflict of people is not healthy, but the conflict of ideas is healthy. And that's what the scholarly process is this bouncing around of ideas, and we just keep it in our head. We don't take offense. In fact, scholars, a perfect scholar, which I'm not one, but would be unoffendable, because we could let any idea bounce off our ideas to create better ideas.
Well, coming back to the marathon type of metaphor, listening, reading, moments of writing, the finish line is the written product, right? And, But in order to finish a race of that magnitude, you have to do all these practice runs leading up to that, and how you said read, right? Each read is a 3-mile run, a 5-mile run, a 7-mile run. And as you go through a doctoral program, the first readings, nothing makes sense. You're like, what is this table? I don't understand this. This isn't my field. This article's in a different subject area. And we're looking for everything to not go to the next practice session sometimes, and we have to remind ourselves to keep positive mentality, especially early in the program, because there's going to be a lot of unfamiliar stuff, a lot of unfamiliar material, which then can lead to increased anxiety, imposter syndrome, and all these things. What would be your recommendation when it comes to getting into the practice of reading and listening? Like, how much can they do at once type of thing without being overwhelmed?
This is a great discussion because I really came to some clarity through 2 independent events where I was learning to Olympic lift. A woman that was new to the program and wasn't doing very well at a particular technique, she says, "How do you get good at this?" And the coach, in his somewhat simplified manner, said, "You do it a lot." Years went by, and I'm in jiu-jitsu, and there's a new student, and she asked my instructor, "How do you get good at this?" And he goes, "You do it a lot." And that brings it back to this topic. How do you get good at reading and digesting and synthesizing literature? You do it a lot. But I think what's important to understand is we can take a concept of maybe strength training or skill training and grease the wheel. We don't need to sit and read for 3 hours. We can read for 25 minutes, take a 10-minute break, and read for 25 minutes and take a 10-minute break. That's called the Pomodoro method, and that probably is the best way to do it. Now, you need to find if it's 25 minutes for you or 30 minutes for you or 45, depends on where you are. For me, 25 minutes works pretty well, then 10-minute little break or do something and then come back and focus. And this really came home to me is after I finished my doctorate, I took a break, I'm on the beach in Daytona, and I read my first novel in years because during the doctoral program, if I had time to read, it was going to be about my research. And I went through this novel in 2 sittings. I could not believe how fast I was turning the pages. And that's when it hit me. I have done so much reading. When I'm reading something for fun, it is really easy. I had actually become somewhat, I don't know technically, but a speed reader when the material wasn't technical. And now that I read many, many dissertations and I'm reading dissertations every week, I found now that I can find elements of research very, very quickly. And then I can discern whether or not I need to read the whole article. And so these small bites, step by step. So you're going to say, hey, I'm going to read 2 articles a day. And maybe that's your 3-mile training run every morning. And then all of a sudden, now when you need to really spend a Saturday reading, and that's your 12-mile run, you've now built stronger legs for those longer strides because you've done it a lot.
There's a really great point in there, I think, that you were making about consistency. I want to add, if I might, an element that we talk about from time to time. You get good at something by going back to it, but you also fail a fair amount. And a third component there, reframing what that even looks like or feels like, perhaps. You mentioned reframing or redefining certain aspects of the experience from prior experience. What, and I'll open it up to both, as you look through your experience, either starting, because I too really had no intention of entering a doctoral program. I was working with a faculty member on my master's work, and he ostensibly put it out there as an idea. Have you thought about it? And I didn't see a reason not to do it, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I think the idea of failure, sometimes we see students say, well, failure is not an option. I think I can speak for myself. Learning from failure is a necessity in a certain sense. But to your point, reframing what that means. What does it mean to fail in our discipline?
Well, I always tell my kids that I coach in soccer, we don't lose, we learn. And I think there's some real important lessons that you have to take to heart when you're pursuing the doctorate that you can parallel with riding a bike. No one has ever learned to ride a bike without a crash. My dad taught me on an asphalt hill. Some tough lessons there, scraped knees and elbows, one down to mailbox. I taught my kids on a grass hill, so it's a kinder, gentler age. But they crashed, I crashed, and I'm sure you guys crashed. You guys have, competed in athletics at a very high level, and I grew up in athletics and have coached athletics. Nobody gets better without those. And so I've established this saying, don't kick your own backside, because the process in the world will kick your backside without your help. So just stop, be kind to you, and say, okay, that was my crash, or that was the mailbox I hit learning to ride my bike. And if we look andragogically how adults learn, we learn by doing, not succeeding, adjusting, and then advancing, and then not succeeding and doing more, and little by little, andragogically, that's how we learn. And so if you know that's coming and you have an accurate expectation, then you're going to avoid that resentment or that hurt of not being successful. The challenge for us with the scholar practitioners, most of the people that come to us who say, hey, I have a family and I have a job and I'm successful in my job, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a full-time doctoral program at the same time. Those are type A personalities. Those are not laid back folks. And those are folks accustomed to being very good at what they do. And wow, how heroic is it to be willing to be humble enough to go, I'm going to become a novice at something, to become an expert. And if you understand that's what you're doing, what you should really be doing with each little bump in the road or failure or skinned elbow as you crash your bike, you should be patting yourself on the back, because you're willing to do something that other people are not willing to do. So someday you can accomplish and do things that they can't do.
I was thinking about, how we just said humility and stuff, and this being our first podcast, the humility of learning a Mac, learning how to use this equipment, this software, and doctoral studies and school in general has changed so much because of technology. We have all this technology around us, and a lot of what we do at Grand Canyon University, students are online and are coming into that platform maybe for the first time, and learning technology or learning the learning platform is part of the learning process. And there's going to be times where they're going to, make mistakes, and they're going to see that, I just can't ask my professor right there at the end of class or during class, right? And so they have to shift, they have to change, and there's going to be a lot of uneasiness there. So my question to you...
Well, your comments are making me laugh, because you know what our listeners don't know? This is our second inaugural podcast.
That's right.
Because the first inaugural podcast, we messed up and didn't have the recording. So
that's right.
You have to be willing to laugh at it, and I'll admit, I haven't done any of the microphones or anything. I'm laughing because, the students are going to see this and they go, they know what they're doing.
Well, I wasn't laughing.
So it's like our students when they say, I lost my paper and when my computer crashed, and we're like, well, we've done it too.
I was a believer in Nick's willingness to learn. Let me say that. And it's been a wonderful learning curve. I think which brings up perhaps another point there, where I think a perception is that we stop learning. I, in a conversation the other day, said it's just a different journey that I'm on. I've finished one goal. You reach 1 mile marker and you're off to the next race, so to speak.
Well, I think a lot of it rests on us as faculty, and you guys have heard me say this, but online technology are not excuses not to be human. They're tools for us to be human. And so we use these tools to reach people, to help them achieve goals that 30 years we couldn't do, because now we have things that we didn't have. This podcast is one. Our YouTube channel is another one. We're toying right now with the Metaversity, and I've piloted with my class where they come in and we have a virtual reality classroom and virtual reality breakout rooms, all in an effort to make this more human. So this podcast is so that we can connect with our students, and our prospective students, and find another way to develop a human relationship with them. So you come in with that willingness to fail and to learn from that, but then the onus is on us as faculty to use these tools to be human and to enrich their lives as they move towards their goal. So I see technology no different than opening up your toolbox, and picking out the tool to best complete a project. And our project is helping people achieve their goals. So this podcast, online, all these things, just other tools in our toolbox. And what I like about this group and our bigger group that we're part of is there's this relentless pursuit to how do we make it better? How do we make it better? How do we serve our students better? And so hopefully this will be one of those tools.
So one more thing. I was just thinking about how I was when I first got into the doctoral program. And then, this is now, I graduated in 2006. So many years have passed since. And what advice I would give myself after having this experience? What would be the advice you give yourself?
Stop and enjoy the process. I was a little too end result oriented. It's my nature. It's both my strength and my weakness. I wish that I had stopped. My chair even told me stop and smell the roses. And I wish I had done that. I tell my doctoral students, maybe in a little more visceral manner, suck the marrow out of this, really love this, and you're going to get more out of it. But I say that with some hypocrisy because I didn't follow my own advice. So if I were to go back, I would say, calm down, enjoy it, love it, learn it. Because I think I pushed so hard and was so competitive to finish at a certain time frame. Even though I was having fun, I don't think I really was as present or as intentional as we were talking about earlier.
How about you, Shannon?
I definitely follow that for sure. I have shared that perspective many times with writers. I say, I can understand a desire to get it done now, get it done quickly. But in some instances, you end up running right by a person or a conversation, a perspective that really changes or opens up a set of questions that you may have had in your mind. Again, the idea that we come in sometimes not willing to fail or fearing a measure of failure or being judged for not knowing, when, and this is another perspective I share from time to time, the reality of our work is not knowing is the foundation of what we do. It's the irony of sorts of asking questions, that it's foundational in what we do. And I think that's the second part for me. It's okay to not know. And that was, quite frankly, it was a bit terrifying to sit there in a class and sit amongst peers who I really admired and respected, and to feel either I shouldn't say something, or if I did, that I'd be othered in some sort of way, right? That you don't know, therefore you're less than, when in fact it's what drives that next set of questions in front of you. I hope they
don't figure out that I don't belong here.
That's right.
Well,
That's
see,
right.
I was the opposite of you two. So I was, oh my goodness, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was a great writer. I thought I could, wait till the last day to write a paper. I thought, that is just normal theater artist stuff, right? Where if you ever see the last 2 days before a production, the energy and the effort is like so intense, and I took that mentality in. Oh, I've written all these like creative things, and this will be no different. And then all of a sudden, one of my instructors is like, you really need to work on your writing. It's not good. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was just like, okay. And then I was looking, but the one thing that I did, and this would be my advice to myself, other than, maybe amp up the effort in the beginning part of the process, was, I was always open to feedback, right? Because I truly believed that they had my best interest in mind. They were there to support me. Like, they asked me, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do this. And so I believed whatever they were telling me was in my best interest, so I was open and receptive to that feedback. So one, keep that aspect for sure, but two, definitely be more intentional in the beginning, and not wait to the last minute on some of those assignments, because the end result wasn't what I was expecting it was going to be. So,
well, gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. I look forward to many more. We thank all of our audience members out there in the pod world for joining us. Dr. Markette, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. I'm looking forward to this collaboration. We got many more guests that we're planning.
The doctoral journey does not have to wear you down.
It's a good note to end on.